All right, so as we get started today, as we're looking forward, we have an evaluation then on Wednesday. All right, and with that being said, or just mentioning that, name a structure in the avian digestive system. Okay, the cloaca would be at the end, and what is that structure's significance? I mean, it's more than one than just its digestive tract. What else might the cloaca be important for? Yeah, it's also tied into reproduction, which is something that had carried over from that of the reptiles, because there you had seen that take place in alligators, where the excretory system from the kidney, the reproductive system from the ovary, and the large colon from the digestive system all empty into one structure and then leave or exit the body through the cloaca. Okay, what's another one? See, it's these opportunities that some of you just flat miss out on because we're just doing other things and reviewing through these. Okay, what is the significance of the crop? Yeah, it's just a storage container. Okay, so two more. Okay, so then what's the function of the gizzard?
To grind down my food.
So,
Or to pulverize.
well, it's going to pulverize it and grind it, but it does that, but how does it accomplish that function?
From the rocks in there.
Yeah, because birds tend to take in other structures like rocks and other aspects that actually begin digestion in the crop, and then with a lot of these sharp edges, eventually, what would you presume would happen to some of these rocks the longer that they stay within this structure known as the gizzard?
They turn round.
Yeah, because probably what's going to happen is as that continues to circulate in that gizzard and contracts, and I'm sure there's really no distinct time frame that would say, yes, in about a month, those rocks will no longer be useful. I don't know if that's the case, and maybe they get totally digested. But they probably will lose their sharp edges, and that's why you see birds continually peck at the ground so they can take in more rocks to help digest materials. Okay, and then one more. We can be a little more specific than just the stomach, because materials go through the back of the throat or the pharynx, down the esophagus, into the crop where it's stored, and then into this structure. Stomach is just a little too vague. The proventricularis, which is the structure where digestion then, or breakdown of materials is actually beginning. So then, once it moves into the gizzard, it can then be broke down. Okay, what about circulation? The circulatory system of birds, is it open or closed? We've heard of that term before.
Closed.
Okay, so closed, that's what it is, but what concept would say, yes, this has to be a closed circulatory system? Why would that be? And to answer that, you have to know, well, there's also an open circulatory system. What might that be? What do they have in common? Open or closed? When we say open and closed, what do they have in common? Must mean they both have something in common, and that would be what? Well, how does blood get from one part of the body through the other? Well, it's vessels, but even though it's in the vessels, how does it move through blood vessels? Nobody? Yes? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And don't forget, juniors, you're in here 6th hour for your Smarter Balance right after dinner. Okay. So, open and close. How does blood move through blood vessels? Yeah, the heart actually contracts and pushes it through arteries and veins, or both. Okay? So then, how would you tell the difference between an open and closed if they both have arteries, veins, and a pumping heart? We said that it's pressurized. That's your clue. Or maybe not that it's pressurized, but because it's closed, it's pressurized. So you can presume that there's something that's linking that open area up, because if it's an open system, blood just pools in an area. If it's closed, something must be linking the arteries and veins together. And what would that be? Starts with a C. Something that you might put on your head, not a hat, but rather what? A cap. So then these would be capillaries that link those two together. All right, so then moving forward then, what different types of cells do we find inside of a circulatory system? And we had talked about that here. Okay, you have these two different types of cells, and the reason that these are important, okay, is this will actually lead into the respiratory system, because what is the function of erythrocytes, which are red blood cells? What might be their function when you look at this? We never really discussed it, but it is something that is carried inside these red blood cells. Because if we said it ties into respiration, it must carry what substance then? Oxygen. Yeah, it carries oxygen in here. Now, one of the things that we see, okay, they lack a nucleus. Okay? And one of the aspects that is true about that, these cells, they really don't divide, they're just manufactured, so they don't have to have any genetic material inside of them. So when you take the nucleus out, that must mean there's more storage for oxygen, and that's why this is has the shape and the function that it does. And then with this, these are actually called, we call them not erythrocytes, leukocytes in humans, in mammals, and the function of that is to keep a handle on microbes, because when these animals take their first flight, sometimes they might not be very coordinated, which can lead to wounds if they happen to fall down to the ground and they're exposed to different types of microbes. Well, then these types of cells will take care of that for them and not allow those to really get a hold in the body. Okay, so respiratory system. I mean, it says meeting the high demands that these animals undergo, and a lot of them have been dealing with the last 2 weeks. And I want you to think about what have some birds been doing these last 2 weeks. So think about that for a moment. Yes.
I won't be here for the Smarter Balance.
Okay, well, you just have to arrange time with Mrs. Milbrandt to make that up, because I don't believe you'd be the only student that will occur with. Okay, so what has been taking place these last 2 weeks that birds have to be able to meet these high energy demands? What are some of them doing? Say that again? Well, that's true, but and I did hear what we're looking for. When animals move thousands upon thousands, well, it doesn't have to be repeating, but when they cover a vast amount of space, means they're migrating, okay? So what happens then is, notice it doesn't end in a tube-like structure called alveoli. For those of you who have had biology, a lot of the mammalian systems are fairly similar, that air will pass through these structures and ends in tiny clusters of, I don't want to say tiny, well, I don't want to say cellular membranes or structures, but at the terminal end of these bronchi is small sacs called alveoli, but birds don't have that, okay? They don't end in this type of structure. It's because, would you be led to believe, would this be more complex than mammals or less complex because of this? Not having alveoli, would that be more or less complex? Now remember, they're meeting high energy demands. So that must mean they're still taking in massive amounts of oxygen. So the answer would be no, it's not more. It is, what I'm trying to say is mammals is not more complex than this, to where the avian respiratory system is actually more complex, because when we talk about respiration, it takes place in 2 cycles, okay? And because of that, it doesn't matter when the bird is inhaling or exhaling, every breath they take, in, out, in they're taking in oxygen, and even when they're exhaling, they're taking in oxygen. And the reason for that is because there's a dual cycle that takes place in these, because they have these structures known as air sacs. This is just a very vague term, just like saying ungulates, for those of you who have had biology. What does ungulates mean to you? Mammals that have these on their feet. It can be, but it's probably not pads. I mean, it can be soft. I mean, when a camel steps on your foot, and I can speak from experience from working at the zoo, that it really does not hurt that bad. You might think, well, these animals are around 2,000 pounds, how could that not hurt so much? Well, because their feet are actually pretty soft, and it's not so much that it's pads, but what surrounds the front of those pads. Okay? Cattle have them, deer have them, pigs have them. Someone might have said it, I don't know. Yeah, they got hooves. Okay? So when we say air sacs, that's a vague term, just like hooves is a vague term for that of mammals, because some of them have 2 toes on each foot, or hooves. Some of them have 5, some of them have 1, some of them have 3. It's the numbers that would indicate which order they belong into. So this is what we mean by we're moving this air in and out because of 2 cycles. So where can you presume, where is this structure? Right here. Okay? Humans and mammals have this same bony structure. It's what actually holds the rib cage together. Well, maybe it doesn't hold it together, but it allows a place for ribs to attach to. So just like in any mammal, this we could consider is just one singular cycle. In and out, in and out. That's just one cycle. So us as humans, why don't we breathe in 2 cycles? So what are we missing that the avian respiratory system has? Because they actually have 2 cycles where mammals and humans only have 1. It's because we lack this structure here, these air sacs, okay? And there's really no reason for us to actually have these air sacs. I mean, it could be an advantage because I don't know if you're old enough to remember one of the most, now infamous, but one of the most famous bicycler that had competed in different types of bicycle races. Neil was his first name. I think, was it Neil Armstrong? Now I'm questioning that. Yeah. No. Is it? Because when I think Neil Armstrong, now I think back to the astronaut. It is I'm pretty sure it is Armstrong. And it's possible. We'll just go with the idea there's 2 Neil Armstrongs, okay? One that was in the first flight that landed on the moon back in 1969, and then also one that competed in Tour de France's, and he won many of them. But he got caught putting, well, I don't want to say caught, but he would put an illegal substance in his blood called erythropoietin. So just with that what was his name? Lance Armstrong. Okay, I didn't think Neil sounded right. Lance Armstrong. Okay, so then with that limited content, erythropoietin, where do you think that has an effect in the body? Well, we'd have to back this up and look at this. Erythropoietin or erythrocytes. What does that have to do with the blood? Well, what do erythrocytes carry? Okay, so what this substance did is actually allowed him to carry more oxygen, which would give you an advantage. But if someone actually had this type of a respiratory system, you probably wouldn't run out of air very fast, because in this 2 cycles, okay, the first part of it, air goes in the posterior air sacs first, okay? So then as the bird exhales, now it's going into the lungs. Usually for mammals, we have to inhale for oxygen to enter the lungs, but that's not the case here. It happens in expiration. So then what happens, then the next respiration, or phase 2, if you want to call it that, air from the lungs enters the anterior air sacs. Then the next expiration, it exits through the mouth, okay? So this is what we see happening. It's so efficient because these air sacs are filling and emptying at the same time. Fill, empty, fill, empty, fill, empty. And then finally, what it says, it doesn't matter where they're at in their respiratory cycle, taking in oxygen or exhaling carbon dioxide, okay, after it's been utilized, they're still getting oxygen whether they breathe in or breathe out. And that's very unique to the animal kingdom. It's the only place that something like this or something this complex can take place. Now, you might be asking, so is this all birds? Yes. But the efficiency wouldn't be just because of having these air sacs, but rather how large they are, I would presume. Because you also have to take into account, we talked about this last week, the smaller the bird, what is its heart rate? It's much, much faster, okay? And we could say even a very large hummingbird, and I don't really know how big they get, let's say it's bigger than a canary, its heart rate is still going to be faster than a bird that's potentially smaller than it. Okay, so I didn't know how long it would take to explain that, but that's where we will stop because I know there is a question that deals with that on your paper, with that of avian respiration. And then finally, for those of you who have looked at the first question on your handout, talks about a robin. Yeah, talks about a robin. I said don't spend a lot of time on it, but if you observe one, maybe for, I would say 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, something like that. Does anyone know what is kind of unique that these robins do when they're on the ground? Because what happens, you see a pheasant on the side of the road, it doesn't take off, it just starts running. Well, birds are bipedal, they're going to move just like humans do. But what is it that robins might do? And it's not just robins only, but that's just one I think that you would, everyone knows what a robin looks like. So rather than running bipedally with like this, one foot in front of the other, what do robins do? I think someone said it, but they actually hop along. They don't run like one foot in front of the other, they just may hop along. Okay, so that's all I have. We will pick up with this tomorrow. Vocabulary evaluation on Wednesday. And again, for you juniors, right after dinner, or lunch, whatever you want to call it, you are in here for Smarter Balance. It's about that time. We need to continually look over at that board on the wall. I guess it's not until Thursday, okay, is our next track meet. And on the schedule, it says you leave before school, and that only affects one individual in here. Actually, 2, I think. Okay, so it only affects 2 of you. Okay, so that's all I have. We'll catch up to you next time.